Hey everybody, welcome to Willow Talk. My name is Chris Baker, and with me as always is
Cameron Suey.
Here to discuss the final episode of Season 1, Volume 1, if you will, of Willow.
Oh boy.
But first, we're going to kick things off with news, like we always do.
Our always feature.
Yeah, the news this week, Season 2. We don't know what's happening yet.
Yep.
So.
No news.
That's it for news. And of course, as always, what we always follow news up with is Q&A, where we take your questions and we answer them.
I'm excited for another round.
Yes, because up until now, we've had a grand total of 0 questions submitted for us. We got one, and it's a doozy. And Cameron doesn't know what it is yet.
Oh, no.
But it's from Anthony Dubinsky 6655 on YouTube, in our YouTube comments.
Oh, all
he
right.
He says, this is the first time I've checked the video for the podcast, and I have one question. Are you standing while recording the podcast, Cameron? This changes my mind's eye view of you forever when listening.
I am absolutely standing. For those of you who aren't watching on the video and you are only listening through the audio medium of podcasts, I'm standing in a walk-in closet in front of a giant hanging sheet. I thought it would make my diaphragm and my voice sound better. And as I say that out loud, I realize I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just sort of parroting something I heard in choir 20, 30 years ago.
Meanwhile, I just sit comfortably in my office with little regard for echoing in my room and such.
Well, as the guy who edits, you always sound just fine.
Oh, thank you, sir. I guess this episode sounded fine too, so that's my segue into shall we talk about... Oh wait, is there one more thing we want to discuss?
Yeah, let's, before we dive into this week's chapter, I think there was something we wanted to talk about from last week's chapter. There's the moment in which Lily, or the crone, tells Eric some very familiar words. But you discovered something kind of fascinating. We thought that the second half of her dialogue sounded familiar. But what did you discover about that?
Oh, well, it wasn't so much discovered as was tipped off to me by the composer of the last half of the season himself, Xander Radzinski. I'm sorry, Xander, I'm mispronouncing your last name. Yeah, he's listened to every episode, I believe, and he seems to like the show, even when we say not the, I think we're pretty easy on the show, but he likes the fair criticism and everything.
He's definitely been an early friend of the show. He wrote one of our early reviews.
Yes, and what he had to say was, hey Chris, I have a juicy tidbit now that you've seen episode 7. The forget what you know speech from Lily to Eric is actually verbatim from the original Willow teaser trailer. John Kasdan said he loved the teaser and wanted that dialogue in the show. So, knowing that, I thought, wow, that's really cool. That's a Willow Talk exclusive. I haven't seen anybody else talking about this.
Yeah.
So I took it upon myself to kind of match up the words that Lily says with the words spoken in the trailer, the teaser trailer. So yeah, I posted this on our YouTube. You can look at it there. I guess we're just going to play the audio right now.
What is good and what is evil?
Oh my God.
Now, forget all you know, or think you know.
Forget all you know, or think you know.
You know what is real.
You think you know what is real.
And what is not.
And what isn't.
You know what is light.
What is light.
And what is dark.
What is dark.
You know what is good.
What is good.
And what is evil.
And what is evil.
Oh my God.
Now,
forget all you know. Or think you know.
Come with me.
I was really blown away the first time I heard this, because I know we both talked about how it felt very familiar. And I am on the record as having seen way too many of the Willow trailers as a young kid. So I do remember seeing this, and making that connection was really kind of magical. So thank you, Xander, a longtime friend of the show. Shout out. We are extremely grateful for that. Xander, as the composer of the last half of the season of episodes 4 through 8, I believe his soundtrack album is releasing very soon. So I will put the link in the show notes for how you can check that out, and how you can hear how he's interpolated and adapted classic themes into the new show, which is really amazing. So thank you so much, Xander.
Great work, Xander. And just about, those words specifically, I was thinking about it, and they fit the show better than they fit the movie, I would say. Because it's all about, like, question, light versus dark, evil versus good, and that. And it's like, it's pretty cut and dry in the movie.
You're absolutely right. The show is a lot more playful with the notions of gray morality, although it ultimately does come down cleanly. In the end, it's certainly the morality is played with a lot more in the TV show than it was in the movie.
Yeah, it works a lot better as words from a temptress than it does as trailer guy. Yeah. Although it all sounds cool. It all sounds cool what's being said, but it doesn't really represent the movie that well. I don't think.
I do miss the voice of trailer guy. It's always kind of nice to hear it again.
Yeah. Oh, good old trailer guy.
Shall we talk about the final chapter of the
first volume 8 of the first volume of Willow, and we will discuss volumes much later.
Yeah, obviously. Children of the Wyrm.
Children of the Wyrm. Before we get to that, though, there's a previously on, and sometimes they do interesting things with the previously ons that, they'll focus on things I didn't even recognize previously. This time, at least the first half of it had like a very distinct style where it was a lot of kind of word salad of just all these quotes that had been said and stuff.
Well,
and environments. Yeah.
I'm glad that you mentioned that, because the first time that I saw it, it felt very sort of rapid fire and disconnected as well. And I thought, like, oh, they're sort of trying to get as much as they can here. The second time I watched it, I have a totally different read on it. And I think the previously on is used in sort of an interesting way here. The distinction is that almost all of the voices are very specifically talking about other characters, and they're telling sort of stories about what they think about the other characters. You hear Willow talking about how Alora is not Alora Dannon anymore. And I want to talk about the notion of stories that we tell each other and we allow to be told a lot in this episode. So apologies in advance. But I think it was very specific in that what you hear in the beginning is a bunch of people's stories about other people.
Yeah, totally. I hadn't even considered that. But what stood out to me was more visual, actually, in this first half. Because you're not really seeing these characters saying these lines. You're seeing scenes of vacant sets, such as Tearsleen, some chasm. Is that the Wildwood? I'm not really sure. It's like kind of foresty. And
I think it's actually the chasm from which the Lich did one of his ceremonies to control Valentine.
And then there's like, I don't even remember seeing this in the show, but it's some kind of like a sorcerer's lair or office or something like that. Do you remember seeing that?
Yeah, but I thought it was a set from Nockmaar, but I could be totally mistaken.
Is that what it was? Okay. Yeah. It looked like a cozy place to work for a sorcerer. It might have been a Nockmaar thing, but it kind of goes to me hanging on to this whole thing that we'll talk about a little bit later too, that it's maybe Graydon's eventual lair.
Yeah. It's
or Willow's or something.
That space that we see in the opening of every episode is certainly a more cozy study than a Nockmaar laboratory. So maybe it was that space. Yeah.
Yeah, it could have been. The only thing that really occurred to me is what it could have been, and I didn't have time to check, was maybe Willow's space in the underground area. But I don't. It had a window, I think. So I don't think so. But speaking of the book, we never actually have laid out what is written on the page, because there is always something written on the page when they open the book, the storybook, and it goes by really fast. You really do have to pause it to even hope to read it. For half a second, you see 3 lines, but you can only make out the first 2 lines. And in this case, actually, before I say that, there's a typo here. Unless SCILLNESS is some word I don't know and is not in the dictionary. It's weird because it's calligraphy, so it's supposedly like someone wrote this, so it's not a typo, it's like a calligrapho or something. But so stillness or skillness is what it says. I think what it's supposed to say is stillness, as in silence, stillness, heart-stopping dread. Neither Kit nor Elora could move a muscle. All they could do was gaze across the wind-swept. That's all we can make out.
I think you're probably right. It's probably stillness. It's probably not silliness, as I thought it might be at first. But I'm going to absolve them of the typo. Yeah, it's probably
ask some people. There might be some silliness in this scene. Silence, silliness, and heart-stopping dread.
Is. It wouldn't be Willow without some silliness.
I just think it's hilarious that typo / calligrapho exists. But yeah, so we finally get to the... Oh, go ahead, sorry.
This is one of the first times that I think we end an episode almost exactly on the image, or rather we begin an episode almost exactly on the image that we ended it on. We go right into Eric's face again. The difference here is that the Gales are now behind them. Although there are only 3 Gales now.
Yes.
Which leads me to believe that, yes, Graydon did absolutely permanently murder the Dag in last episode.
Go Graydon.
Yeah.
She goes to Wyrrats too. There are a couple of Wyrrats back there, or something like a Wyrrat.
I thought those were death dogs that are zipping behind, but they're definitely a warmer, redder tone coat than the ones we're used to.
Could have been. I guess I'm thinking more show mythology at this point than I am. There were death dogs in the first episode, though, so that makes sense too. And yeah, Eric greets them. You don't know what's going to happen based on the last episode, and he's just like super friendly. This is so great. What a wonderful treat. He thanks Kit for everything she went through to get there. It must have been tough.
And it's sort of intentionally... Elora. Yeah, it's sort of intentionally very disarming. And I love that the physical way that they stage this is that Kit and Elora physically have each other's backs. They're back to back the whole time, and they keep sort of pivoting to whoever thinks is best suited to engage Eric or to defend them from the Gales in that moment. And I love
of silliness.
Yeah, it's silly, but it's also a great bit of like exaggerated body language to show how close they are in their relationship and how sort of in sync they are.
And it's practical because one of them really does need to be watching the Gales just in case, right?
Yeah. And at this point, Eric is obviously still trying to peaceably convert Kit and Elora over to the crone side. He acts very differently than he has in the past. It might be that he's hydrated after being dehydrated for so long, but it's not quite Eric. He's a little too confident, a little too formal. And I think that it's interesting that the one time that slips is when he notices Mad Mardigan's sword. That's when he sort of slips back into the more like loose, like, hey, tones of his voice that sort of swing a little farther and are a little less officious.
So the tone of his voice actually seemed really familiar to me, and I couldn't place it until I finally did. He sounds like Owen Wilson. Where did you get that?
Yeah.
Is that Dad's sword?
I think unpossessed
like
Eric does have a little bit of Owen Wilson DNA in his character performance.
So, he starts talking about the crone a bit, which apparently is a term he was not familiar with.
Yeah.
Never, he's like, what? What's a crone?
The version that he's seen wouldn't fit that word.
She's amazing and fascinating, but also really intense. Laura's not amused by any of this.
Both Alora and Kit are doing some masterful facial expression work during a lot of these scenes, responding to this version of Eric that they haven't seen for so long. And Alora's reaction to Eric's positive description of the crone is pretty telling.
Yeah, so Eric's basically inviting them inside, and he says this line. See if this sounds familiar at all. Listen to her and go home. It's the only way. Does "It's the only way" ring a Lucasfilmian? Does that jog your memory banks in any way?
I mean, not in any specific, but I think in the sense that characters that are in the final test and have to face some sort of temptation from a higher power, that could be Return of the Jedi, going, knowing.
What if I rephrased it as, "Come with me. It is the only way."
Darth Vader offering power. Is it Darth Vader offering power to Luke in Empire Strikes Back?
Yes, it's the last thing he says before Luke takes his big plunge.
Yes.
And it's also the last thing we hear in this scene. I do think that's an intentional. There's throughout this episode, I think they're pegging Eric as Anakin Skywalker / Darth Vader. I really do.
I think Willow especially, and Lucasfilm in general, both intentionally tread on the same mythic themes as Star Wars does. So I think it totally makes sense that they are revisiting some of the same sort of mythic archetypes. I do think that the focus on character in Willow over the focus on plot and spectacle means that those themes hit a little harder for me in Willow than that they have in Star Wars in a while. I think a little more intentional care was put to that. And I think it's something that I think they kept up really nicely in this whole episode.
Yeah, it definitely is more of a character-driven show than a plot-driven show. I think if the characters were not so strong, I would not be as with it as I am. I've talked about things that I'm not really a big fan of in terms of things that happen in the story. But listen to the Wildwood episode, for example. but the characters are great. And
I forget who it was on our Twitter that mentioned that usually when you have an ensemble show, you have preferences among the cast. But like this person, forgive me, I forget who this was, but I also agree that I don't really have a favorite among the cast. I really genuinely love the whole group, and more importantly, how the group works together.
Yeah, they each have their own kind of dynamics amongst themselves. Kit and Jade obviously had the awkward romance turned into full-on romance for a while there, and Laura and Kit, I think, is a really great pairing. That has a huge arc to it in itself.
The more that I think about it,
almost
every pairing has an interesting dynamic to it. It's not just each character has one interesting relationship.
Exactly. And of course, more of these characters are when we get back to the edge of the waterfall.
Yes.
Having
just watched Alora and Kit leap off the edge of the world.
Yes. They're discussing the situation. Borman's, Jade is threatening to go over the edge herself, and Borman's like, "You ever hear the phrase, if your paramour jumps off the edge of the world, wait and think about it for a second before you follow her"?
And that works for Graydon as well.
Well, it's pretty famous. That was one of the bigger laughs I had in the show. That was pretty famous.
Yeah, that works for Graydon as well, who is also about to follow his paramour off the edge of the world. So he's talking to both of them.
Yes, exactly.
One of the things that I so loved about this sequence is that Willow, it doesn't seem like he changes his tone much, but he moves from this sort of indecisive and frustrated mode to something that's more akin to like the Socratic method. He's not telling anybody what to do. He's not encouraging them anyway. He just starts asking people questions about, maybe you're supposed to go, maybe you're not. What do you think? And And it's like this sort of echo of the power to change the universe is in your finger. He basically provides each character the space to make the decision to jump alone, or to jump. He doesn't tell anybody to do it. He just sort of asks these questions that lead them to say out loud why it is that it matters. So for Jade, it's, why are you doing this? It's because you love her, isn't it? And Jade says, well, yeah. And if you love someone, that's what you do. When you love someone, when they need you, you jump over the edge of the world to help them. And that's, Jade says that to herself, and that's what gets her to jump.
Yeah. She also, Willow asks her, or Willow tells her that Madmartigan told Allagash that his child would shoulder that responsibility for him. Kit is Alora's protector. And who protects Kit? I do, says Jade.
Yes.
Yeah, and then she's like, this is bigger than Kit and Eric. I can feel it. This is the beginning of a war, and they can't win it alone.
Yep.
Which is a pretty big statement. This is the beginning of a war in the final episode of your first season.
Again, I think it goes back to that confidence that they have, and I think we'll talk about that at the end, but I think this is a very confident move, and I love it. And you're right, it is very forward-thinking, but I love in the moment that it really is Willow giving everybody the space to figure their own thing out.
He's also just being like the good mentor of the group, and like when he tells Graydon, "I'm proud of you. You're on your way to becoming a great sorcerer." She totally reminded me of Fenn Rizal saying that to Willow.
Yeah,
I think that was
and an even better
show.
Man.
An even better man,
which is really wonderful. And
in that Rizal scene, Rizal said, "You're on your way to becoming a great sorcerer," and the brownie said, "Willow the sorcerer, you make us proud." So it's definitely reflected the proud of the great sorcerer line. Absolutely, that scene from the end of the movie. And Graydon says we'll see each other again. They are in the same space for a very small amount of time near the end, but do they actually see each other again? And I'm wondering if this is a much more ominous statement.
Looking back on it on my second and third viewing, I definitely winced at that.
Yes. I guess we'll talk about when they see each other again could actually be later on.
Yeah. And then when it's just Boorman and Willow, Boorman sort of makes the play of like, well, I guess we're walking home alone. And Willow totally doesn't engage him on it at all.
He calls him Willie, which I loved.
Yeah, no one's done that before.
Looks like it's just you and me tonight, huh, Willie?
I was shocked.
That has to be some kind of reference because he's about to explain it, and then he's like, never mind. And I couldn't figure out what that reference was, and that's kind of...
I mean, it might be as simple as because your name is Willow, so Willie?
Yeah, but he's like saying... I think it was probably improv on the actor's part. But yeah, go ahead. And
so when it's just Boorman there, Boorman sort of makes that play of not going to jump over the edge, and then sort of hems and haws about maybe there's something to the whole helping someone. And Willow calls him on something that I believe that I said in episode 2 or 3, which is that Boorman's lying. He absolutely cares. Like, a lot of this is an act. And I love that he just cuts straight through it and says, no one's buying it. Because Boorman absolutely is loyal. He does care. He does want to help them. He just has to do it in the context of the story he tells himself about what kind of person he is. And Willow gives him the space to just be like, hey, look, you have this lineage of people that are proud of you. You have done great things. And I love that Boorman's response to that is just total non-engagement, leaps off the waterfall to avoid crying in an uncomfortable
he says,
moment.
don't, because I don't want to start crying and I'm about to get all embarrassed. And then he's over the ledge. Yeah, he doesn't, Willow doesn't actually get to finish the line of Madmartigan would be proud of you.
Yeah.
But he's going to say that.
He doesn't need to. He has accomplished giving Boorman the space for self-reflection that he needed to. And yeah, jumping over the edge is just a 100% pure Boorman move. I love it.
Yeah. So we switch back to everyone at the temple where Eric opens the door.
Yes.
And he says the door swung open and I could see everything.
Yes.
Which it actually brings me back to before the show. I was just looking at Reddit, and someone had a whole thread about like, what do the doors really mean in Willow? Like, there's doors everywhere.
Yes, huge doors.
To which my immediate thought was, there's a quote from the band The Doors about how, we know about some things, and in between the others, I'm butchering the quote. I put it on that Reddit thread. But yeah, and then of course the fact that he looks like Jim Morrison because Val Kilmer looks like Jim Morrison. It's a whole meta thing.
I also think there's a lot of, with the Lovecraftian and Cthulhu texts that they're drawing from, there's a lot of sort of conceptual doors and portals to other realms that they're already playing with. I think several people have translated most of the Nakhotic alphabet from the various things that we've seen in the show. And somebody, I believe, and I'll try to provide a link to this in the show notes, has translated the Nakhotic text around the sort of vermiscus altar in the center of this room. And it's I believe, not only a direct reference to a Cthulhu deity, Yog Shoggoth or something, but it also mentions the key and the door, and other sort of those sorts of images and archetypes. So yeah, there definitely is a whole lot about doors and passageways. And there's really sort of importantly two doors in this room. There's the door that enters into this altar, but there's also the passageway beyond it that we've never seen into, the one that Lily was staring into the previous week. And it looks much more like less like a physical door, more like a tear in the wall. Like the stone even seems corrupted around it. So there's like a lot of different types of doors. And if I were a much smarter person, I would have a very coherent theory tying that together. But I'll instead just notice that they're playing with a lot of door tropes and images in interesting ways.
And at times they break on through to the other side.
God, I still don't see it coming.
So yeah, Kit asks Eric if he's been drinking the vermiscus, and Eric
yes
has this like total Jim Morrison moment. A mother gives birth. Her body makes milk for the child. It's nourishment.
Yeah.
It's part of himself that he gives to us.
It's a ringing endorsement for the Wyrm's milk.
Yeah, it's well, when your mind is corrupted or whatever, it's sort of him saying it's the mother of our mothers almost, like it's the thing that makes life happen, even though it's not. I don't know.
I love the simple disgust that Kit and Alora have for that. Like, oh, that stuff's really bad. Like, oh, gross, you shouldn't.
Alora is like, it's part of himself that he gives to us. And who is the he? Alora asks. Then we get Lily's dramatic entrance.
Yes.
The Wyrm.
She gets her big evil queen glow up.
Never actually named Lily in anything but the subtitles and the credits, though.
I think we've just taken to assuming
it's just the new girl or Crone, as we'll come to soon.
Right. And I love that she clearly doesn't like the name the Crone, but isn't about to be too upset about it, because she's still trying to keep this very positive, inviting atmosphere. Like, they are still definitely trying the honey conversion, and trying.
Yeah, she actually says, "You may be the only person in the world who can call me that and live."
Right.
Because she needs her so because much. She needs her. Maybe not needs, but definitely very much wants, because she has Eric, and she needed one of them. It'd be nice to have a second to presumably further enhance the strength of whatever evil this is.
There's a great ongoing goof here that Kit doesn't quite understand how to explain what's going on. She can't remember the word harbinger earlier. And in this bit, she's like, you tried to banish Alora to the 13th night. And the Crone is like, you have no idea what that even means. And legitimately,
don't pretend you have the faintest idea what that means.
Legitimately, I have no idea what that means.
I think it was ultimately a wink, like a fourth wall break. All of us.
Yeah. But I also,
it doesn't matter. It's a bad thing.
it goes into that sort of plausible moral deniability that the crone exists on for a while.
I wonder if even the showrunners know what it means to banish Allura to the 13th night, or if George Lucas or Ron Howard know what it means.
You know, I think we have probably talked before about consistency in story building being the thing that matters the most to me. And I would like to assume somewhere that there is a show Bible of sorts that has that answer in it. That they could always change later, but as long as
in the movie they say to banish her soul to the netherworld, which is all we need. That's bad.
Yeah,
that's bad. I mean, it's misleading on Lily's part to suggest that it might not be bad.
Yeah, I'm still trying to carry water for her. So she says the crone says that that they will be offered a choice. And again, seeming so positive. And there's a great beat where Allura and Kit step aside to try to formulate a plan. But instead of formulating a plan, they gossip about how Eric is a dummy and very gullible. And neither of them have a plan. And it's such a great sort of bit of sisterly tension to them that they're already working so well together that they work terribly together as well. I really enjoyed that beat.
Yes, Kit specifically says, one time I convinced him, he was pretty gullible, one time I convinced him that he had Bugenhagen's disease and all of his fingers and toes would rot off if he didn't drink large amounts of vinegar. I made it up. Bugenhagen is a reference. Do you know what that is?
I do not.
I had to look it up. There's no way I would have got it on my own. But Carl Bugenhagen was an exorcist and an archaeologist located in Tel Megiddo in the Omen movies. He was buried alive. That's a straight.
Oh, very nice. To another
the wiki, the Omen wiki. Of course, there's an Omen wiki.
There's a movie.
I've never seen any of those movies.
There's a wiki for every franchise. Oh, they're great. I'm going to resist saying we should do a podcast where I show you old horror movies you haven't seen before. Shouldn't do that. I need some sleep.
They're each like, I thought you had a plan. And no, neither one of them has a plan. But before that, I thought it was actually amusing when Eric says that she's going to awaken the Wyrm and bring about a new age of this world. And Kit has one of the funniest deliveries in the show, maybe the funniest outside of Borman, where she says, yeah, that sounds really bad. That made me laugh.
You know, when we talked so early on about modernity in dialogue, switching up between the seriousness of the arch seriousness of fantasy and the quippiness of modern dialogue, this episode was the one where it fired on all cylinders for me, because the quippy modern responses to these epic and sort of weighty sounding fantasy things are hilarious, and the cast is so good at still keeping the gravity of the moment without undercutting it, but still having this unusually modern response to it.
Yeah, what would something like I don't know, Rings of Power respond to that statement with? She's going to awaken the Wyrm and bring about a new age of this world. It'd probably be something like I don't know, not no she won't. It'd be better than that, but it wouldn't be, yeah, that sounds really bad.
It would be equally florid and as important and weighty sounding, and that would work for Rings of Power, a show I genuinely enjoyed a lot. But I think Willow really plays on the bouncing tension between seriousness and silliness and modernity and sort of fantasy.
Yeah. And this particular scene ends with Lily saying, everyone's choice is their own, only you can know what it is.
Yeah.
Which, given events later on, I think there's a huge irony here when it comes to Lily's idea of choice.
Yeah, something of a Hobson's choice. And I'm really glad that we see the results of choosing one way and choosing the other.
Explain Hobson's choice as if I did not know what it is, for the sake of our viewers, our listeners.
Traditionally, a Hobson's choice is something where you're offered two choices, and one of them is something you obviously will not choose or should not choose. And I believe it comes from an old legend about an innkeeper offering people two different options, one of which nobody would ever take, and the other being an overpriced room that you had to pay for. But a Hobson's choice just basically means a choice that's not really a choice.
I would have summed it up very similarly to that, because obviously I knew exactly what that was the entire time.
Absolutely.
And was not asking for my own benefit.
As learned men and gentlemen, as learned folk, we simply wanted to inform the listeners what a Hobson's choice might be, which I definitely didn't Google previous to this.
So Graydon and Jade are themselves now close to the Immemorial City. We get that familiar kind of hilltop that overlooks it. And Borman shows up.
Yes.
And yeah, so they see this huge storm. Well, storm is underselling it.
Yeah.
Maelstrom of evil?
It looks like
perhaps?
a sandstorm from the Mummy movies at first. This is also the second episode of Willow that uses a visual, that uses a storm as a sort of a visual countdown clock. And I think it's just so easy to do. And I think it makes such a strong image of being under pressure and in danger.
The first being in the first episode, is that right?
I think it's the second episode. There's the noxious maw, the gap in reality that's making the it'd be the Battle of the Shattered,
right.
or the Battle of the Slaughtered Lamb.
Okay.
Uses a storm as its primary driver. Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, because this, I think the same magic is basically what happened in the first episode when the Gales invaded Tyr's Lean. Am I wrong about that?
Oh, that might be. I'll have to go back and look at the sort of the visual design of it. I remember that being sort of
going
more
off
foggy
of memory here.
and less sandstorm.
Yeah.
There's a lot that's,
yeah, you're right.
There's a lot that's unsaid about the mechanics of magic here. And I think genuinely most of the time it's for the show's benefit, that it feels grand and mysterious and obviously threatening, but I don't need to know the specific details of it. I genuinely love, there's a sort of a throwaway Borman joke here where he says, look, we're this is the end of the world. This is going to go terribly. Does anyone want to make out? And it's such a throwaway joke. And, Jade has an incredible, like, oh, Borman facepalm reaction. But I genuinely like that at no point in the series has anyone defined anyone else's sexuality. And they've just let it be completely open. It doesn't come up in the text for Kit and Jade's relationship. We're never told, how the society views lesbian relationships or any other queer relationships. They simply are, and they're totally accepted. And I think that really underlines how they have sold queer representation in this show, which is that it simply is. Nobody has to define it.
Yeah.
Nobody has to call it out and point to it. And I just think that that's such a great direction for representation.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say, though, that it felt like the most kind of forced Borman line, really, in the whole series. I think it didn't really fit. But I did think it was really funny when he kind of played off of that a minute later and said, well, since we're not making out or anything, let's go do this.
I think it's to be proof that Borman is canonically pansexual. And I think Graydon considered it for a split second.
I don't, but that's open to interpretation.
He moves pretty quickly to the quest at hand, which is sneaking into the city, which he does by completely covering his face with dirt, which my wife points out that maybe that's what he was doing on the Shattered Sea on the island when he had his face.
I thought about that too, and specifically because you mentioned it. I would not have put that two together, but
well,
in the last
everybody
episode,
else,
you mentioned that.
While everybody else
He's
was
been honing his camouflage abilities.
Yes, Borman was. That's why we didn't see him during that whole montage, is he was getting better and better at camouflage.
Yeah, I wonder if people are complaining about the word camouflage existing in this universe, because I don't think that's really a medieval concept necessarily.
Listen, we're in a post-Greyonce world. I'll hear nothing of it.
Yes. So yeah, they decide they're gonna infiltrate the temple in camouflage.
Yeah.
But then we're back to Allura and Kit. They're looking at the light, and you see Eric and Lily from behind, like, kind of just watching, like, kind of confident that they're going to go in there. I was a little confused, actually, at this moment, because Allura says, yes, I'll go alone. Then Kit says, I'll wait here. And then Kit goes in.
Yeah.
This
is one of those things that, on the benefit of a third watch, I think they're doing something kind of clever here, which is it actually starts off with Kit saying, wait, you told me not to go in the light. You seemed that was kind of important. And then Allura is sort of like, well, I don't know. And to me, I think that implies a long scene where they were slowly approaching it and being like, we shouldn't do this. We shouldn't do this. But obviously there's some sort of hypnotic call to the Wyrm's presence. And I think that's what it means when Allura's like, I volunteer to go. And Kit's like, great, because I don't want to. And then immediately walks in. I think there's a sort of a hypnotic pull beyond what your desire is. I
noticed on my second viewing, there was sort of a trance-like look in her face.
Yeah.
She did that.
And I think it's important to know that the Wyrm and that the Wyrm's draw can convince you to do things that you might not otherwise choose to do. I think resistance there, even though that they are both interested in taking the next step, that their resistance is subverted and it seems like they're forced in, I think is interesting.
Yeah, but then they go inside and it's gorgeous.
Yes.
It's a very lovely environment. Absolutely reminds me of Winterfell from Game of Thrones. Just the red tree there, only obviously it's not snowing like it would be in Winterfell.
To me,
it's a much more spring-like environment.
To me, it felt like one of those really fantastic outdoor sets built on an indoor stage from Labyrinth or Legend or
Wizard of Oz, even,
or Krull,
really old school.
Yeah, Krull, it had that very 80s science fiction look to it. That had that very 80s fantasy look that I like.
And given what's going on, it does the hyper reality of it all does make sense.
Absolutely, yeah. And they are greeted very quickly by Sorsha, who now I think this is interesting because I think we can agree that Sorsha is not there, right?
Oh, absolutely,
This is not Sorsha. And
this is what eventually what Kit wants to hear from Sorsha.
Yes. So this is where the idea of stories started to coalesce to me. What the Wyrm's power is stories. It's telling people a lot of stories that they specifically want to hear. And I think the reason that it's so seductive is that a lot of the times the stories that the Wyrm is telling people are composed of 90% truth. And it's only a tiny little fragment that pushes it into the Wyrm's direction. So this is the point where I started to realize everybody's being sold a story at this point when they enter here. And I think it's fascinating that Sorsha proves her existence through physical touch, which seems sort of like very primal and like unable to fake. And it seems to very much make Kit believe that she's talking to Sorsha. But at that point on, she's saying everything both Kit and Allura have always ever wanted to hear. She is crafting the story that both of them need the most. And I really think that's the Wyrm's power, is that the Wyrm is either a writer or a propagandist, and is able to find the stories for people that can most make them the Wyrm's servant by making them think that they are doing something good and of their own volition.
I mean, he's almost literally a cult leader, and in the real world, that's kind of how cults.
Yes, radicalization. And
totally.
Allura even says this is a beautiful lie. And I think for a lot of people, that's enough. I think a good story in which you are doing the right thing and you can be comfortable with your place in it can be very dangerous.
Yeah. Allura, but at the same time, Allura goes off with Eric by herself, and she leaves Kit with Sorsha. And that takes us back to our other trio, where we see how they're doing with the camo.
Yes.
Which is, it's basically useless.
Yeah.
It's basically just something Boorman wanted to try out. Maybe he's always wanted to do it. He saw this as the time to do it. And it's just, there's no reason to.
I love that when they call him on the tortured logic of hiding from who, that Jade's first response is to put her head down on Boorman's shoulder of just like, oh, Boorman. There's just so much genuine love between the characters, even when they're being buffoons. You can just feel it on the screen, and it's perfect.
Yeah, so they walk through the entrance to the city. A Wyrm, or maybe it was a death dog.
It's a death dog. I do believe it's a death dog. Yeah.
Okay, that makes more sense actually. I had Wyrm in my notes.
It's sort of anti-Chekhov's death dog because it's threatened and seen, but I don't think it ever returns.
Yeah. So they try to get in the door. The storm's coming up. Borman can't open the door, so he's like, Graydon, do some magic. And Graydon was like, right, I'm a sorcerer. Like he forgot. Yeah.
He's so delighted by that fact. It's so charming.
Yeah, but it's not really helping him out so much because the sandstorm's quickly coming. You see a face in it straight out of the Mummy, like you mentioned earlier.
Does it look like Bavmorda to you?
It did. It actually did. Yeah, I had that in my notes. Actually, I saw that in some trailer long time ago, like before the show came out.
As we talked,
that made me think that Morta might be in the show. Actually, like that image.
As we mentioned before, I have avoided all trailers for me, and boy, did that pay off like a doozy this week. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But that sandstorm hits them, and Borman says, "Oh shoot, guys, I'm turning to stone," and then he turns to stone. And I have to know, how did Borman know what petrification felt like?
Yes, I was wondering the same thing.
That
line was just a little on the nose for me.
Well, and I also didn't think we needed it as an audience. Like, I can see when someone turns to stone, but I kind of like the idea that Borman is like, oh no, not again.
Okay. Yeah, so it's the scene from Spaceballs where the alien pops out of the guy's chest.
Yeah. Borman has had a storied life full of very strange things.
That's an interesting take, and I really like that take, actually.
Again, if I like something, I will carry water till the day I die.
Yeah, I'm going to throw out there that Cameron and I are available to write prequel comics and such, and that could be a scene.
Well, I was going to save that for the end.
Yeah. There we go. That's the name of the issue, the first petrification.
Borman's first stoning.
Yes, Borman gets stoned.
There we go.
Back to the illusion. We got Sorsha and Kit. This is where Sorsha is just like laying it on her.
Yeah,
and
from what we heard, and from what we've heard from Kit before in that beautiful galactic night sequence, she's telling Kit exactly what she wants to hear. You don't have to be a queen. You are not meant for this. You can be who you want to be, and you can do it who you want to be with. And then we have a shot of Jade, who's also there, who, of course, cannot be there because we know Jade's outside.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
again,
and the big, I don't know. The thing here is like the last thing that real Sorsha did, for Kit was to let her be her own person and to go on this quest. Remember? Like, Kit was like, I should go there. And she totally expected Sorsha to say, no, you're not, young lady, you're staying here. But Sorsha's like, yeah, you should do it. So in a way,
right,
she already has this.
Right. But I don't think it was something she heard before. It comes so quickly and it obviously causes her such a start. That it is also, it's meaningful when the Wyrm Sorsha says it to her, because it is, to a certain extent, is something she needed to hear. But you're right, real Sorsha was already starting to push that way.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's why the Wyrm has difficulty fully capturing Kit here. I mean, there's a couple reasons, but I think maybe the fact that, what Kit needed to hear is actually what Sorsha is letting her do right now. May have pointed out the fact that this was just a story.
Yeah. Part of me wants to think like the writers are leaving it up to us to remember that and think it through. And then part of me is like, maybe not. Maybe they. I just don't know. Like it could go either way. I'd like to give them the benefit of the doubt, though.
Yes, always. So at the same time, Allura is with Eric, and it's unclear to me whether this is real Eric, or whether or not this is a simulation of Eric in the same sense that Sorsha is. We see later that it has Eric's memories, but that's, we don't know how far Eric has been subsumed into the Wyrm. But I really truly don't know here. But again, this simulacrum uses touch to prove itself. It asks the sort of question about lightning from the fingertips, and he touches her very gently. And I think she sort of recoils slightly from it, but it also puts her at ease after a while. This version of Eric is doing some things right to keep her comfortable.
Yeah. So there were, I don't know if they're intentional or not, but there were two Star Wars things that I was reminded of in this particular scene.
Hit me.
Well, first of all, the lightning from the fingertips.
Yeah, totally.
She's an empress, and she's talking about the Emperor's powers. So that's something. And the setup like totally reminded me of Attack of the Clones when Anakin and Padme are just like having lunch, and you're making fun of it's kind of an awkward line scene.
It's the same sort of allure of budding fascism.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's like I kind of see that same thing happening here, but almost it's good that it's awkward a little bit, and that
definitely
Eric is weird, and I do wonder if that's intentional in some ways, because there's more Star Wars references, or at least remembrances, or things that remind me of Star Wars, I should probably say. As we go on in this, for sure, and I will touch on those.
I love that as she's talking about magic to him, that she describes her cooking and how naturally cooking came to her. And I think we talked about that before, that was probably in the absence of her being allowed to do magic, that was probably where her magical powers were coming out. And I love her description of it being so easy. And then when she tries to do magic, it's not like that at all, because she's kept herself from that ability. And I winced at how she described this. But she says, I can see what being good would look like. And that cut me, because I've never been good with visual arts and drawing. And I feel like I'm just over the horizon from being okay at it. And I always can feel I can see what being good would look like. But I can't get there. So that sort of tension and the way she described it was very well put. I love also, as we talk about Star Wars references or Star Wars powers, he asks about lightning from the fingertips, but he also asks her if she can fly. Both powers we see later in the episode. But I've also always wondered why Jedis can't use the Force to fly. I feel like the first guy who figures out just how to Force lift himself is just going to go whizzing around, and all the other Jedis are going to be like, "Oh man,
like Magneto,
we should have thought of that."
They do have like a enhanced jump. You see Obi-Wan do in episode 1, but yeah, like they totally forget about that for the rest of everything. Really,
Jedis can fly; they just haven't figured it out yet. They
also have like enhanced speed, and when they're fighting the droidekas at the very beginning of episode 1, and we never see that again ever.
Nope. Yep. Inconsistent. But yeah, I do like that he introduces the concept of both finger lightning and flying. And then he offers Alora her story that she can choose. And her story is not being Alora Danan. Just like she said at the end of the last episode, I don't want to do this. It is going back and being who she was before and being able to marry Eric. And then this is the most sort of knife twist, is that he says, before all those people died to protect you. And this is why I'm glad we had our cottage woodcutters sequence before, is because I think
people still, I saw like someone recapping everything they thought about this series, and they were like, so yeah, that scene in episode 3 that never came back to that was totally meaningless. No.
Extremely
it had a lot of meaning, and I don't see why people don't see this.
It is the emotional anchor by which she is held down. It is the guilt that people have died without her having any input on it. It's super important, and I think it's super important that I think it's really important that the Wyrm's story that it offers her is to be absolved of that very particular responsibility.
Yeah,
Now,
it was an also. No, sorry, I was just gonna say it was also an important scene because it showed just how devoted everyday people are to Allura for no other reason than having faith in her.
yeah, and not even Allura, but the story of Allura.
Yeah.
Again, time that stories are used, maybe this time in a more positive method. So I have a question for you. The Wyrm offers them both a glass. Excuse me. The Wyrm offers them both a glass of vermiscus, and to make this choice. Do you think the Wyrm has the ability to fully change time and space, or is the Wyrm basically going to be putting them in a simulation like they're in right now, where they roughly have what they wanted?
Is he going to put him in the Matrix, basically?
Yeah, the vermiscus matrix.
That's a good question. Yeah, no, I think he wants the power of Allura.
Yeah,
or it, or whatever the Wyrm is.
I think the crone uses the Wyrm wants pronouns.
Power of Allura and the blood of Kit. So I feel like there's more than just like keeping them out of the way.
Yeah, is it
yeah.
possible that the Wyrm is not being honest about what it's offering them? Will he not follow through?
Well, that would be maybe the world that they see or whatever while they're doing whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Or maybe they're supplying some sort of power to him, like the Matrix, I guess. Like,
yeah, Ballantyne seemed to be operating under like a different fiction at that time in his head, even though he was doing other things. I guess that form of possession is like an accelerated overhot. They overclocked Ballantyne from a distance, possessing him. So as they're both getting these stories, Kit hears the voice of Madmartigan. And I have to assume that this is sort of where Madmartigan is. He has descended down into the Wyrm's realm. So now he's able to speak directly to her.
Yeah, and this also confirms to me something I had doubted in episode 6, I guess it was, that actually was his voice. That really was Madmartigan talking to her at that point.
Yes.
And I was never really sure that. I thought it might have been a trick from the crone or something. And what would have happened if she had gone through that door?
And I think at that point I pointed out that the voice of Madmartigan was not telling her to come through the door. It was saying, wait, I need your help. I need your help. So she wasn't stopping to hear what he needed. So yeah, maybe it was Madmartigan was trying to warn her away at that point. But yes, I think it's clearly confirmed that this is Madmartigan, that he has been and is able to observe her, and that he tells her that the most important thing is to protect Allura Danon, that you are her sword and shield.
Yeah, I thought it was a fun moment where Kit's like, "Dad, I'm not you." "Yes, you are." "I'm not." "All right, you're not. You're better."
Yes.
Just there was a little bit of I guess Jack Kilmer channeling his dad's performance. Yes,
he's doing a really great job doing his dad's voice. And I think the show is doing such an elegant job of passing the torch along a variety of axes in that very same way. It's really nice.
You are her shield, you are her sword, and I'm already so proud of you.
Yeah.
It's just nice to hear voice of Madmartigan again.
And I also think it's really nice, given Val Kilmer's restrictions for being able to be a part of the project, that they found a way for the character of Madmartigan to be so critically woven through the story, and within everybody's abilities, especially during COVID and filming.
There was part of me thinking, are they going to show him? Are they going to show him in this, this utopia fake setting?
Yeah.
With loop technology from Mandalorian or whatever, and they didn't, which is probably a good call. Although I feel like Val Kilmer would be fine with it if they did something like that.
I mean, it definitely does depend on the actor. It's when actors are no longer with us and can't give their consent that I start to prickle at the ghoulishness of it. But yeah, absolutely. And so really all he does is give Kit the strength to say, you know what? No. I acknowledge that is a very attractive thing you're offering, but no. And then that's the point where we learn that the choice is nonsense. As soon as she decides not to make the choice, the crone says, well, I tried, and turns her to stone as well. So
because she had gone to try to save Alora from Eric, but the crone was there instead.
Yes. And the crone tells us that Alora has already chosen.
She made her choice. The right choice. The Great Awakening has begun. And then we get like this scene of what looks to me like a combination of Mordor and Mustafar.
Yeah, and so
I'm going to call it Mordstafar.
So on this aerial shot of Mordstafar, I mean, what it seems like is that it's, parts of the Immemorial City are opening up and rivers of Vermiscus and sort of previously contained armies are peeling out. And I like spectacle and I like widescreen coolness. I got to say, this didn't work at all for me. Much of this show has been about being intimately scaled and keeping it focused. And really most of this episode keeps that up. But there are a couple of these overhead shots of like the whole city and a lot more big dramatic things happening that I don't think are necessary. I think it's so much better sold when it's, characters who know and love each other fighting intimately over, these difficult stories, than it is to say, well, now there's a zombie army that Willow can shoot at. I think just using the gales and the storm and keeping it tighter focus, I would have preferred. And fortunately, there's like 2 of these scenes, right? And they probably work really well for a lot of people in setting the sort of larger scope and stakes. But I just found myself preferring... I was
on board, but I hear your argument there.
Absolutely. Yeah. The cool thing about art is that everything is subjective. But yeah, I found myself not connecting with those in the way that I might have in, say, an Avengers movie.
Is it too much of a paradox if I say that I disagree that everything is subjective?
Yeah, that's dividing by 0. I think we should probably...
I don't.
We should probably take some time for an ad real quick and hash that out, and we'll be right back. The ad this week is for Milk of the Wyrm.
Okay.
With a list of side effects that I'm going to accelerate and speed up really fast. Okay.
Nice.
And we are back. And now that we are back in that sort of the Wyrm matrix, we see Alora is prepped for the wedding to Eric.
Mm-hmm. Yes, everybody's there. The whole gang is there, but they are looking as stoic and just not alive as they possibly could be. Completely still, no smiles, no reactions, just there.
And I love that a couple of times now in the series, Alora has been confronted with a situation that might otherwise be positive, and that she is confronted with something that makes her deeply uncomfortable about it. She, you can really tell it sort of shakes her out of her reverie. She's excited to be there, and these, especially Graydon, his presence makes her momentarily uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. And I've seen some people point out, her hair is blonde, not red.
No, she is reverting back to before she was Alora Dannon. She's beginning to get what she was offered.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I really love that as the crone is officiating the wedding, that she says, listen, you crossed the world to save the man you love. And now this is basically the continuation of that story. Again, the Wyrm is doing 90% truth and just pushing her along in a slightly different direction that she feels like is her own choice. And that's what makes the Wyrm so particularly seductive. And that's why I was so often thinking, hey, these things that the crone is saying don't seem all that bad. She's talking about freedom and other things, is that she's using the 90% that that fundamentally feels correct, and tricking us in the margins there. So I love that they continue to do that in the wedding.
At the same time, there's part of me that's like, hey, I really liked Eric and Lily as a couple, but apparently they can't be a couple anymore because Lily is literally doing the officiating at this wedding to a whole other person.
In a certain cursed way, you get your wish a little bit later.
I guess so. So yeah, Lily is like, he's all yours.
And Well, and also Eric first says, remember before when I said all I needed was for you to look at me that way? Well, actually, I need a little more. And I think that's notable. Like he's saying what I said before is not enough. And I think that's especially jarring when compared to Graydon saying, I don't need anything from you. I just want you to know that I love you. I think that's a really telling comparison.
Cameron much more in tune with the Grayola contingent of
oh man. I'm halfway there to writing ship fan fiction at this point. I'm sorry. But I also think that it's what he asks for is the kiss, which, seems to be sort of a power transfer where he's drawing something out of her, which I think is very interesting because that's exactly how she drew the crone how she drew the Wyrm's influence out of Graydon earlier.
That's right.
So right. I think a more intelligent podcast than us could probably have some incredible symbolism about kissing and that sort of stuff in fairy tales and mythology. But I just thought
don't tell them to listen to What the Force because
definitely not. That is not the podcast.
Do not go to that podcast.
They definitely don't know their stuff about mythology and symbolism.
No.
No, they're great. You should. So when Allura realizes, I don't have to do this, and I'm not into you. I think, realizing that Eric is asking for so much is so unlike the Eric that she knew. And again, this is another one of those moments where the modernity of the dialogue worked really well for me, where she's just like, oh, I'm not into you. You're being really creepy right now. It just felt very, very authentic in that moment.
Well, speaking of creepy, like right before that, Lily says he's all yours, and then we get the crone, and all of you is ours. And I'm wondering, like, is Eric hearing that? is Allura hearing that too?
I think Allura does.
Like
I think
it seems like a pretty evil thing to say, and if there's even a hint of choice within Allura, it's like, oh, maybe I shouldn't do this.
I like how that they subverted the withered crone by having it played by a young woman. I'm a little uncomfortable with the notion of ugliness and physical deformity being aligned with moral evilness. But putting that aside, ew, what a creepy, gross face the crone has when it's revealed. It's and
I mean it's an evil ugliness. It's not like
there's a sort of like it's mucus draped bit of jewelry going from the nose to the ear underneath the like ruined part of it. But we're getting
got a tiara or crown or something going on there too in the crone form.
We're getting ahead of ourselves.
And as people have pointed out on Reddit. Oh man, I never have these things prepared to give people credit, but look on Reddit. There's a very close resemblance to Snoke.
Yes. I don't know how intentional that was. I was brought to mind of it because this is the first fully CG character that we've seen, I think, in Willow so far. So that's why I immediately thought of Snoke, is that there's a similarity there. But the design, you're right, has a remarkable similarity.
I mean, it's a similar purpose too in Snoke. Snoke and the crone in many ways have the same goal.
Yeah, it's like poetry; it rhymes.
Exactly, and it's yet another Star Wars reference. One that I didn't even catch. I never thought about that until I looked at the Reddit thread today.
And I at this point, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, because at the wedding, when Allura says no, the crone pivots to two things. She pivots to threats and the offer of godhood, basically. So I think those are pretty desperate gambits for the crone to make at that point, when she knows she's not going to get what she wants.
And when Allura actually says, not you or him or some Wyrm is going to make me do something that I don't want to do, we mentioned earlier kind of the ironic quote unquote choice that Lily the crone is presenting. She's denying her of choice here. So
absolutely,
Allura is declaring her choice to be free when choice was the initial allure.
the choice of the Wyrm is absolutely an illusion. The Wyrm is going to offer you a story with the way out, and if you aren't going to follow it, the Wyrm is going to kill you or turn you to stone. And I think, once Alora decides not to, I think that's probably what the Wyrm would have done in that moment. And I love that she says, "Who are you that you would accept the hard road when the easiest road is laid out for you?" And I think that's the Wyrm will lay out the easiest road for everybody, which I think sort of thematically we know that choosing the easiest road is not going to be the most effective choice, but the Wyrm is going to find a way for you to do that benefits the Wyrm.
And of course, playing off of that question to Alora, you get this staff slamming down. Willow enters the picture. She's Alora Dannon, last blood of Chimeria, future empress, high priestess, Symptom sorceress of the Nine Realms. And you, young lady, or not young lady, you lady, are in big trouble. Not a young lady at all.
Huge dad energy.
Yes. Yeah, Alora's like, oh wow, he came to save me. That's kind of the look she has on her face. Everybody is like really her kind of I don't know. I think it's kind of what inspires her to be who she is in some ways.
Everybody is so delighted to be in everybody else's presence by the end of the show. It's just such a palpable love that they have for each other. I love his magic here that he slams it down. And I talked last time about the magic following sort of like nodes, and this time it feels even more geometric. It almost feels like sacred geometry. Like it's sort of carving, mathematical energies out of the sky. But it's really gorgeous, and it breaks apart the illusion, which shows us that Alora is actually lying on the altar where Eric was forced to drink the milk of the Wyrm last week. So
we have to infer that Eric was seeing similar, utopic visions.
Yes, yeah,
when that was happening to him.
And we learn a little bit more about what the Wyrm offered him as we go on here as well. But yeah, it seems to be the spot of ritual.
Yeah, so as soon as Willow casts this spell, she's free of the vision, and everyone is free of their stone spell as well.
Yes.
Kit says she's feeling a little crusty. Kit's at her funniest in this episode for whatever reason.
Yes, she's also at her most confident, which I think probably is hand in hand. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess the fact that she's realized, who she really is and what she's supposed to be doing and doesn't have the chip on her shoulder.
Yeah.
I think is really letting her be the likable character that, she wasn't. That a lot of people seem to just not like the show because Kit is so annoying at the beginning. And it's it's called storytelling.
It's character growth. Yeah. I also think
exactly.
That, maybe viewers would be more accepting of other annoying characters that eventually became more heroic, because there have been thousands of characters like that. The difference here with Kit is probably that it's not played by a white male this time. So yeah, no, it doesn't seem out of sorts at all to me. It feels like good character growth. You're allowed to like unlikable characters.
And I think just maybe interesting, weird way, it's sort of a compliment to the show in that shows of this tone, I guess, maybe you don't expect much of them, and you don't expect every character really to have an arc. And so you will assume based on past shows you've seen that kind of feel like this one does initially, that this is who she's going to be the whole time.
Yep.
And she's not. And, that's more damning of bad stories in the past or something.
And also, if there were only some sort of witty saying about not judging a book by its cover or something, you can engage with a whole piece of art before you have a definitive opinion on it.
Exactly. I mean, there's still, I'll just say right now, there's still a lot of things I wish they had addressed in this show that they don't.
Oh yeah.
But, there's still room for them addressing it, if we're lucky enough to get volumes 2 and 3.
As a storyteller, I feel like the best compliment that I could ever get is, I wish there was more, or I wish you explained other things. So I agree with you, but I also think it's important and cool and awesome that they left so much stuff unsaid and on the table. So the Gales and our heroes sort of enter the climactic combat here, and again, in keeping with that sort of, you've seen a sword fight before, a lot of this happens behind you, and is just sort of conceptual fighting. And I think, in scale, conceptually, this episode is really big, but in execution, I think they're super wise about keeping it very small and very simple. Sometimes I feel like I lose the staging of it, and I lose who's in what room and doing what, because it becomes so simple. But I think by having it be sort of elemental and character focused, the beats that I remember are not, it was cool when that one guy did a flip. The beats that I remember are the emotional, important beats during this bit. We have the
and I think part of that too, in a real world sense, is just production simplicity.
Yeah, but what you do smartly with your limitations, I think, is sometimes more impressive than what you do with an infinite budget.
Right. I got to say too, when the Gales show up, you get this nice shot of Boorman and Jade, and like, no one has looked more badass in this show than those two right there. That's like the shot.
They are so freaking cool. Absolutely.
They're both like, bring it.
So the newly disgusting crone, bears down on Allura and says, why are you doing this? You know how this ends. And this is where it hit me. Chris, I don't think any prophecy that anybody has ever gotten in this show comes from anywhere but the Wyrm. I think all prophecies have been stories that the Wyrm is farcasting to people to do what it wants. It said, Allura's going to die, forcing Allura to not learn magic and not become powerful. It told Willow, Allura's going to die if you bring her out here, making Willow doubt and, not as sure about training her. Then the Wyrm told Allura, you're going to die out here if you come and fight. This is a prophecy. So I don't believe a single prophecy that has happened in this show so far. They are all
What about the movie?
Wyrm prophecies.
Is the Wyrm responsible for saying Sorsha's going to turn on Bavmorda, and that Allura is the child of destiny, and that sort of thing?
I have only come up with this theory in the last 24 hours, so I have not extended it that far. So let me think about it. But I definitely think that all of the granted prophecies in this show, textually, including Mim back at the Nelwyn village and all that stuff, is all Wyrm talk. Getting people, it's basically telling people the stories that not necessarily that they want to hear, but stories that can push people in certain directions. It kept
Wyrm Talk, our true rival podcast that celebrates
what you secretly don't know is that this has been Wyrm Talk all along.
Oh no!
Dun dun dun.
Oh man, plot twist.
But yeah, I really truly feel, and I think that there's a big piece of evidence in my favor a little bit later at the end of the show. But I love Graydon coming in, picking up Shalindria's wands, and the fact that I knew instantly what was about to happen, and I said out loud, "Oh no!"
We skipped over some good things from the fight, though. Like,
go ahead.
After Boorman and Jade are looking all badass. We'd see Allura use Shalindria's wand, and it just kicks the crone out of the whole room, and it's a different environment they're in.
Wait, actually, I don't think that, doesn't she kick the crone out when she does her finger charge? At this point, she uses Shalindria's wand, and Eric jumps in the way, and she blasts Eric into the wall. And then
that's right. And I totally am not reading my notes and forgetting. Yes.
All right. So let
me at Crone, but Eric jumps in the way and goes flying. I think I just saw aimed at Crone and flying, and didn't read the middle of the rest of my note there.
All right. I'm gonna do a clean break here, so we can just excise that. So Allura picks up Shalindria's wand, and tries to use it, but Eric gets right in the way of it and gets blasted into the wall. Which, it's interesting how much Eric is like wants to protect the crone at this point. I wonder how much of that is, this person is going to give me what I want, or how much of that is she's really interesting and amazing and really intense. I'm not really sure what axis Eric is trying to protect her on. But it means that Allura drops the wand.
Yes. You think you can defeat the Wyrm? He's eternal, bitch.
Yeah.
That's a line that was said. It's kind of an army of darkness. I call it like an army of darkness kind of tone there.
That might be the framing that I need to enjoy that line, because it was one of the ones that sort of felt a little sour to me. But I also, as good as the crone looked, it's very much a CGI character. So I would have loved to have seen a practical, but at that point, I don't know how complex a practical for that character could have been.
Yeah, she's kind of like a Unreal 3 kind of character. Not the game, the engine, where everything's like has this kind of shine to it.
It's a little bit wet looking, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So then we have Graydon entering the scene and picking up Shalindria's wand. And immediately I knew what was going to happen. And I said, "Oh no," out loud, because it was pretty clear.
Well, before that even, or maybe at the same time, Graydon's like, "You mean this little stick? I can do this. Show me."
Yes.
It's like, and that made me think like, Graydon obviously has this past that somehow involves the Wyrm and the Niconic stuff and all that.
Yeah.
And is the crone here like, let's see how far you've come,
yeah, young
Sith Lord or something,
Unanswered is how much prior connection, knowledgeably conscious or otherwise, that they've had. But Graydon unleashes with an incredible burst of narcotic. I think more than we've ever heard in a single spell. And it just lights up the entire room. But it's not quite enough.
Yeah, she brushes it off, much like Luke in The Last Jedi.
Yep,
does the
right
little
off the shoulder.
Yeah, that made me think, was that another reference? There's almost every single Star Wars movie that I can... There's something.
There's a palpable love of Lucasfilm and Lucasfilm properties, I think, running through this.
I mean, in just this episode, like every so often there's something in the rest of the show, but this episode seems to really be laying on just the moments in Star Wars that only like the really hardcore fans probably know or would think of.
Yeah. And so the Wyrm, or rather the crone, picks up Shalindria's wand and snaps it, which again is sort of fulfilling a prophecy that she had told Allura before, is that the wand will snap and then you'll die. But we know from the end of this episode that the Wyrm's prophecies don't necessarily come true. Only the ones she can make come true.
Yeah, so she picks up Graydon, throws him into the room, the glowing room. Do we have a name for that room?
I mean, it's the sort of like rift in reality that the Wyrm is behind, but nothing pithy yet. I mean, I think it's more than lifts up Graydon and throws him in. I mean, it looks like she disintegrates him, and that the particles...
Yes, that was the rest of what I was going to... He appears to vaporize along the way.
Yes.
I had in my notes.
It seems a quite final death of the body at that point. And as Allura comes, rushing up, after the crone says desire is the most exquisite agony of all, she comes rushing up, and every other time we've looked in the rifts where the Wyrm is, it's been the Wyrm telling you a story you want to hear, right? It's been the garden where we talk to Sorsha. It's been whatever anyone sees. I feel like this is the one time that the Wyrm didn't put up the Wizard of Oz glamour. So this is the time we see the Wyrm in its as close to true form as possible, which is which is just this infinite expanse of horrific flesh bound into what looks like volcanic mountains on Mustafar. Yeah. It's a really fantastic, creepy, cosmic horror image. It reminded me a lot of the climax of the first season of True Detective, where the characters get that brief glimpse of like the stars hanging in the sky. It's sort of like this brief window opening on a realm beyond your comprehension. And
do you think the worm wanted her to see it like that, or you think maybe he was weakened by the fact that the crone's been weakened a decent amount at this point?
I mean, I think you can make a good argument for that, but I also think you can make a good argument that in this moment it would behoove the worm to show Allura how immense and eternal it is.
Yeah. Instill some doubt.
Again, I'm trusting the worm that what I saw was the worm.
Yeah, it could have been just a field of daisies or something, right?
Hang on.
So we see Allura there. She's got kind of the magic sort of building within her. This green magic starts coming out of her fingertips. And that is when she sends the crone out of the door with a blast that we don't even see the blast that happens, but we know it's super powerful.
I love that, we've talked before about the wand, specifically Graydon's flute, being a conduit, but the magic is in yourself. And this show trucks so much on the images of, the weapons and the tools of other characters, of Mad Mardigan's sword, Shalindria's wand. I mean, even in the first movie, it wasn't Willow's wand, it was a prior character's wand. There's all this legacy to, these physical objects that are being handed down.
Yeah, it was interesting the phrasing you just used there. I believe the slogan for the movie was "The magic lies within." So that theme is very much driving this show.
Yeah, and I mean we've seen it in things like Thor as well. I mean it's a very sort of common mythic theme that a character believes that an object or a magical item is what provides power, but then in the loss of it, you find that power is within you. And I think it was nice that they set that up, and then that they broke Shalindria's wand to really make that separation, so that this is the true power of Allura Dannon.
Shalindria's wand, I feel like they could have built up more. Even in the movie, doesn't do that. I mean, it does some things. It turns the troll into the Eborsisk. It makes more to twirl around when Rozelle's using it. It turns Rozelle back to her human form. So it does things, but it's not like. It's just like it still just seems like a magic wand. It doesn't seem special enough that I feel like that should have been more of a moment than it was.
In the first movie, at that point, the wand is just being used as a conduit by a rural hedge wizard and a sorceress who hasn't practiced magic for 30 years because she's been a possum. So it's possible that both of them in their weakened state couldn't milk much out of Shalindria's wand, because clearly Graydon got at least a stronger blast of power out of it. But ultimately that's not what matters. It's just an object, and it's up to each person.
Yeah, I'm just saying I wish it felt like more of a moment. It snaps and it's like, oh crap, she doesn't have her wand anymore. But I don't know. I don't know. I'm trying to think of some examal of
shattering Thor's hammer
weapon. Yeah, something like that. Because we had Thor's hammer is more of a integral part of Thor than Shalindria's wand. Even though Shalindria's wand is probably the most iconic thing.
It's the thing you can buy as a Mastercraft prop from the movie. So yeah, definitely. But actually, I think I can make an argument for that I like that it's so undercut, as that it's not important ultimately, that it's a symbol that everybody imbues with power, but the moment it's not there, it doesn't affect Allura. In fact, Allura is able to do even more. And she just knocks the crone out of the room and into a different scene. Which is really fantastic.
Which gives her time to talk to Willow, and they have the sweet moment.
I belong
Willow
standing
says
beside
he came
you.
back. Yeah, it's where I belong, standing beside you. Creatures approach, and he says, "Now I'm going to go kill these blokes."
Yeah, and I think at this point we get another one of those overhead CGI type scenes. And I feel like Willow could have just been fighting one of the Gales and being like, look, you're fighting the main boss. I'm here to protect you. I'll fight a Gale. I didn't need the sort of extra threat of those sort of hazily defined zombies. But such a minor complaint.
Yeah, well, I'll throw in a slightly bigger complaint in that they made such a big deal out of Willow not using magic in the first 3 or 4 episodes that he's just straight up using magic here with no sign of any kind of side effects at all. And
Yes.
I feel like that is kind of something that they really should have addressed in some way with a line.
Well, I think they did. That line was, "Don't worry about it." But you are right. It's not. It's not entirely consistent. But I will leave room for them making it consistent later on.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, way back when it was like, it felt like foreshadowing for a bigger thing, and there wasn't, at least here in Volume 1. There's no real payoff to the lack of magic other than he couldn't try to heal Silas.
Yeah.
You know?
Interesting. And I wonder, because this scene does end with this episode ends with the breaking of his magical focus. I wonder if possibly he had less internal power and more external power, and that he sacrificed some at the end of this. But again, I think we'll probably, that's either a plot hole or a opportunity for the future.
Spawn theory still available, still a thing that could happen.
Yep, still in the wings. So when we cut back to Jade, Kit, and Borman, Borman makes the sort of obvious decision that that Kit should have the cuirass, or excuse me, that Kit should.
Is
have
it
the
obvious?
cuirass.
I mean, it could. I know a lot of people were thinking Jade would get it. And
Oh, really?
I could see that too. Yeah.
I think the way that this last episode elevated Kit as the sort of Mad Mardigan-esque protector of Allura, that's where I felt. But you're right; it absolutely could have gone to either of them. What I genuinely love about it is that Borman's realization there is, this is not my story, and I think that's such a nice way of doing. Both Borman and Willow have moments like this in this episode, where they are passing the torch and realizing that they aren't the primary protagonist of the story anymore, in such honest and believable ways that I think the show does that sort of passing the torch motif in such a much more elegant and natural way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I love that the cuirass fits Borman very well, and then when he puts it on Kit, it's just like a comical clown outfit. It's just so big and baggy on her.
But not for long.
Yeah, that's true. And again,
I guess we aren't quite to the point where she applies the Lux.
She doesn't activate it yet, because also Borman gives the Lux to Jade at this point.
Yeah.
My wife pointed out that the only time that the cuirass has worked in the show has been when other people activate it for you. It was the mother that activated it for the son when she made it. So maybe it's about collective belief and not necessarily individual fortune and glory belief. But yeah, I think that was notable. She pointed that out.
Yes.
This is one of those moments where I think like the staging of who's where and who's being threatened by what kind of falls apart, because the Gales aren't there, but then they appear behind him, and then Borman locks himself in the room with them. And I'm okay with all that happening off screen. I think at this point it gets almost too loose in its staging. When you go the opposite direction of the sort of huge overhead shots of thousands of characters moving at once, I feel like here we've lost the positioning of characters, but it only lasts for a couple of moments here.
I feel like we could write a whole issue of a comic that is Borman versus the Gales right here.
Yeah.
And all the wackiness that ensues.
One of the wonderful things about Borman is that Borman can do stuff in the margins of the TV show, and it's fun. He's having a good time.
Yeah. And I love, he goes into that battle very confidently. I'd like to leave this world the way I came in it, butt naked and kicking ass.
Yes.
Okay, boys, who brought butter?
classic Borman overconfidence. I am very curious to why he's so glistening and sheening when he comes out later. I'm worried that someone did actually bring butter because he looks filthy.
I did not notice, but maybe that's how he celebrated.
So our magic duel between Allura and the crone, I love how physical the magic is, both the way they move in order to use it, and the way it sort of through the sound design, especially how the magic has this incredible physical presence on screen. Like there's a weight to it. I love Allura's almost dance-like confidence as she's slinging that magic around too. It's just,
and it is a very green versus red Return of the Jedi duel.
It is beautifully striking.
Star Wars reference there.
But it's notable for, I think, for how sort of like loose and fluid she is in her movement. I love it. I think this is where the smaller scale works the best, is in the next couple of sequences, because they're really just using the same set that they have, which is that narrow road they have of the Immemorial City, but they light it in such vastly different colors and flood it with sort of sandy fog that it becomes entirely this sort of beautiful subjective space where we focus on the characters for all of these combats. You know, I don't need to see the legions of zombies and the flowing rivers. This is the heart of it. This is the character conflicts and their resolutions. And it looks so good when it's just these beautifully like green and red lit, almost ghostly environments.
Yeah. And part of that is Kit yelling to Eric. And then she's like, Eric, the crone lied to you. And you know, he's not buying it. And she says, "You're my brother," which is like, this whole sequence. Does that remind you of
Oh, yeah.
I just keep coming back to all these Star Wars things it reminds me of.
It's the sort of like mythic, it's the same mythic underpinnings of like myth and fairy tales that Star Wars is based on. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and his response, "I'm your king," like,
yeah,
it's not exactly what Anakin said, but it's kind of like, you know, I want to be the greatest Jedi who ever lived kind of thing.
Well, what's fascinating for Eric is that he previously had no interest in that.
Right.
So that's something that the crone has convinced him that he is interested in, that he should be and can be. I love so much that Jade's reaction to that is just that rapid fire, eyes raised in disbelief, and then just shakes her head and she's like, "Nope, I've heard enough." She absolutely has no patience for any patriarchal nonsense. And they go right into the sword fight.
Yes. And Allura is actually watching the fight while she's like dodging these blasts from the crone.
Yeah.
Little multitasking going on there.
Yes.
And she kind of like does a little, I don't know, find some cover. And that's when Willow actually uses telepathy, which we know for sure. This is the first time I've been sure that it's actually Willow talking. Going back to what you earlier said, I still think it's possible that the Wyrm was telling Sorsha in Willow's voice that the Gales were coming and that sort of thing.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, so Willow says, "You're still afraid. It's okay to fall and make mistakes. I've made lots. Embrace your defeats as well as your victories. You pay for both in the end." I love that line.
Yeah, I wrote that entire thing down because I love that as well. And
same here.
It also underlies what he said the past week about, you know, embracing your doubt and your jealousy and all those other things. And I love that message of like total self-acceptance. There's two moments like this. There's also the Borman telling Kit that, you know, believe in yourself, you know, and you're going to be unstoppable. Where they're just really lovely sort of mentors giving these in the perfect moments, inspirational, quick beats to their mentees. And my wife, as we watched this, she had just recently lost her mentor to illness. And this really cut to the quick for her. These were both very effective moments. And I love that also, you know, as Willow says, you know, you pay for both in the end. He also says, something simple, which is be decent and fearless, you know, and he could see, you know, be a hero. He could have said, you know, be all you can be, but be decent is such an achievable and simple and important thing that I think gets lost a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And I just loved it. Incredible beat.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, there's just tons of fighting going on right now.
Yeah.
So we got the sword fight, the magic fight. Wyrm's presumably doing his thing. Willow's doing his thing off screen too. But
that incredible moment of self-confidence gives Allura all the power she needs to physically tackle the crone and knock her to the ground, which felt a lot like Raziel punching Bavmorda.
Yeah.
Like, it's when magic fails, we go
too.
to fisticuffs, and I love it.
Yeah, and then they just it's magic bolts fight.
Yeah.
Magic bolts back and forth until Allura is just too strong for the crone, and the crone's chest bursts.
Well, and they have this cool moment where Allura is shooting beam after beam, and the crone is not able to keep up. It's almost like they're playing Missile Command with their magic. Sorry, everybody, I'm old. And I think I've seen probably 10,000 movies where two wizards point their fingers at each other and VFX comes out.
Right.
And I tend to get very bored at that very quickly. But I thought that the Missile Command image was really, really visually interesting. It was a great way of showing the contest of power. I think the only other notable magic VFX duel that I've seen recently that I loved was Doctor Strange, when they're fighting with magical notes. And it's, making the score. So that's a hard sell for me. Yeah, that's a hard sell for me when two people are screaming and pointing, and it gets added in later. But this looked beautiful.
Yeah, it did.
Did
now
you
I want to
notice-
hear missile. I want to hear Missile Command gameplay over that to see how well it ends up.
We'll do a little YouTube short. Did you notice that when the crone flew, that she no longer had legs, but she had writhing tentacles dripping mucus?
No.
Yeah, super gross. I loved it.
That's a Cameron quote for you.
So when the
For
crone
gross.
is on the ground and Eric goes running to her, to Eric, she looks like the beautiful young lady that he's seen, but to everybody else, she looks like the crone again. And through the lens of the Wyrm is a master storyteller, what she says to Eric in that moment is, "Oh, I was always supposed to die. It was always supposed to happen this way. It's all about you now." It's the Wyrm is so easy to pivot its story to be exactly what someone needs to hear to get the Wyrm's way. So they lean in for a kiss. And again, there's that kiss using the transfer of sort of magical essence as a theme. And Kit has perhaps the greatest expression of all time in reaction to that kiss. She has one eyebrow up in the air and the other one dropped down, and she just looks disgusted. It's fantastic.
Did you catch a Star Wars reference here?
Nope.
I
Give it
think
to me.
I did. What do I do? How do I help you? Says Eric. You already have. This is something very similar. Well, Darth Vader says those exact lines.
Yep.
Or Anakin, I guess he is again at
Yep.
that point. At the end of Return of the Jedi, Father, I have to save you. You already have.
This is a bit of
and the angle of this was very similar to that. I do think it's intentional.
You're right, and this is sort of a dark mirror of that moment as well. Did you notice that when Eric absorbed the Wyrm's power from the crone, and I think we can safely say the crone as an entity has passed away.
Yeah.
And Eric has absorbed her power. Did you notice that his face was sort of wounded on the same side as the crone, and his eye was blinded and milky on the same side that the crone had a physical injury on that side?
Of course I did, Cameron. How could I not notice that?
Because it was so
I didn't.
obvious. So I'm wondering if there's some symbolism to, the loss of the left eye or the damaging of the left side of the face that agents of the crone exhibit, or excuse me, agents of the Wyrm exhibit. So I'm curious about that. And I hope that's something that is symbolism that they follow up on. And this moment is
Snoke, an agent of the Wyrm.
Yeah. This is the crossover proof that we needed.
Exactly.
This is, of course, the point where they activate the armor. And I gotta say, Chris, was the armor in the trailers of any sort? Did you see pictures of the armor beforehand?
I think I read somebody saying they saw Kit wearing the armor, but I don't remember actually seeing it.
Yeah, I think I
Not
don't
like
know,
this.
because I didn't watch any trailers, but I believe that the armor appears as an image in one of the trailers. And if I had seen the armor beforehand, I would have been like, oh yeah, cool armor, very cool. And then if I'd seen this sequence after already seeing it, I'd be like, oh yeah, it's turning into the armor I recognized. But since I had no idea what was going to happen, this totally blew me away. I thought it was just going to sort of shrink down and become like a breastplate of her size.
Right.
I had no idea that it was going to turn into like a full-on level 100 MMO set of armor.
After the Lux just basically goes into her heart or something?
I have to assume that it sort of went out laterally like the roots of a tree.
Yeah.
She does say later she doesn't know how to take it off, which is potentially worrisome.
And she has like this reaction like something entered her almost, and and the heart would be a very symbolic thing to attach itself to, so maybe there's some magical connection there. Were you in any way, given the record of modern music this show seems to have, were you expecting, as you saw this armor doing its thing, to hear Black Sabbath's Iron Man?
No, that might have been a little too on the nose for me. No, I was mostly geeking out at, holy cow, look at that. That's really cool.
Yeah. But it's totally Iron Man.
So Eric, with his new gross face and wormy powers, launches himself at Allura. And I love that at this point, Allora's like out. She has fought her battle with the crone. She's even like down on her knees. Like she's no longer able to do this. So it's up to Kit to get in the way. And I talked before about the sort of like the use of lighting and fog. They do something really cool here where like the scene is all orange until she puts on the armor and defends Allura, and then the lighting all changes to like green tones. That's the same as her armor. And it's like the actual environment is showing the ascendancy of the different colors of magic. And it just becomes this very like subjective emotional space for this fight. And I love the way the armor sort of glows with magic as she moves around.
Yeah, it's really cool. And of course, she releases the swords from...
Yes.
They're Wolverine-esque almost, but what they really are is what we saw Eric.
Yeah, it's totally Eric's gauntlet sword. And again, like,
yes,
this show does so much cool stuff with the use of prior characters, legacies, names, and weapons. I think it's super fun.
So in a way, it's Jen Eric versus Jen Eric here.
All I know is I'm an old guy. I should stay out of that one.
And we have Allura giving a little pep talk of how we both believe love is the most wonderful thing in the universe.
Yeah, so after Kit defeats Eric, because of course she does, she's been training for this, and she's armored by faith and magical items. She is finally ready to sacrifice somebody, where she wasn't ready to do it with Graydon before. I feel like that's what she was talking about here, is that there's a lot of things she's talking about giving up, but she's willing to lose Eric here. And I'm going to go on the record as being the curmudgeon that does not like the Fifth Element. I think the ending of the Fifth Element is so sort of clumsy and on the nose with its thematics. So it's a dangerous thing to tread on the power of love as a sort of elemental thing for me. And I think this worked for me because of a couple things. One is that it wasn't just lip service. It wasn't just like, oh, I love you, so the magic stone unlocks and we saved the world. Allura doesn't just say the power of love and then everything's better. She says, we both believe in the power of love. And notably, Allura is not drawing the infection or the Wyrm out of Eric like she did with Graydon. Willow is not offering any magic. They are both telling Kit, this is for you to do with him. And I love this for so many reasons, because what they're saying is there's no magic fix to this. This is a choice Eric has to make. She says, speak to him and maybe he can come out. Because I think Eric has to consent to coming back from that place. It can't just be that he's dragged back to morality. It has to be a
Was
choice.
there a point in previous episodes where Kit actually said that love is the most wonderful thing in the universe? I remember Allura saying it.
Yes.
I don't remember Kit saying it.
Oh, I know. Kit and Allura have the conversation about it when they're trapped in the Wildwood, where Kit is a lot more cynical about it, like I might normally be. But I think the fact that the way they pose it and the way they frame how it actually saves Eric makes the power of love message pretty much land on all tires for me. I liked it a lot. I think what was also super wonderful is that when they're showing clips of the past, showing how much they love each other, they could have very easily shown clips from the first episode where they were hanging out and having fun, or even outtakes from the first episode, but they actually cast younger actors, filmed a variety of scenes that felt, authentic and very much like twins in, playing and loving. And it was a really lovely composed beat, and it could have been.
It actually had me thinking just for a second, did we see this stuff already? Because it feels like we probably saw this stuff already. No, we didn't see this stuff already.
Yeah. And
it was cool.
Yeah. And again, it's not, we've got to pull the bad magic out of Eric. It's Eric's lost, he's been radicalized. We have to, we have to show him a way to come back. It's almost like cult deprogramming they're doing. There's no magic spell to it. They're helping Eric come back on his own free will. And I think that's just, it's important thematically that it worked out that way. It could have been a lot clumsier, and it wasn't, and I'm impressed.
Yeah. So it works.
Yep.
It works. The evil is drawn out of him. Willow says, "You're okay," and I loved Eric's response. Who is that?
Yeah.
There's no way he would know who Willow is at this point in his life, because he's been away from this whole adventure.
Yeah. We're unclear how much he's been there for the Crone's machinations, but he certainly has never met Willow before.
No.
And then Borman comes out of the door, and he seems to slide the cleaver back together. Like the cleaver has some sort of transformation function we have yet to see. But he does seem to be covered in butter. Go back and look. He seems to be glistening. But I love his very understated, "I want my mom." Because I love the theme of scoundrels loving their mothers in Willow. Allagash.
Well, we learned last episode that he hasn't seen his mother in years, and
that bothered him. He wanted to see her.
Yeah.
And so as we, he also gives Allura Graydon's wand at that point. And they have the sort of touching goodbye where they realize that he really is gone. And the show ends with them, they have completed a great thing. And they've accomplished the quest, and so much of it has been resolved.
Well, I think it's worth mentioning what they say about Graydon. Jade says no one's going to know how brave he really was.
Yeah.
And then Kit says they will. I'm going to tell them. This is a completely different approach to Kit's attitude toward Graydon, right?
That's true.
At the beginning of the show.
It also means that she's going to publish his writings, which become Volume 1. Because she's got skins in the Tiersleen publishing industry. But yeah, I like that, they are basically setting out on another quest at this point. How do you get home from the edge of the world? There's a lot, there's a huge open road ahead of them. That's really exciting. I love that Borman tells Eric, "Hey buddy, you've got to prove yourself if you want to adventure with us." Because it's funny and charming, but also in the sense that Borman is the glue that keeps everyone together. Eric has some atoning to do for. And I think the show knows that. And I think that's going to be addressed in future.
I wouldn't be surprised if there's still some touch of evil in him at some point that resurfaces.
Yes. And, Allura has seen the Wyrm. She knows it's still down there, but they know that there's nothing they can do about it. And Willow doesn't seem that worried. And he says, "I've got you girls, and pretty soon there will be more." Like a snowball rolling downhill, which is a really lovely, talk about fan services. I'm a fan. You have service.
Well, soon there will be more. Is he implying some sort of Jedi Academy type thing.
I want to believe. I mean, Jade just says there's a war coming. It's bigger than this. We're going to need more. So
I mean, there's a I've been reading the Grayola's contingent of fans out there, and they're all kind of like saying that this show is doing things that the sequel trilogy should have done and didn't. And to that extent, there's a certain sect of fandom that wants the more Jedi Academy stuff, and maybe we'll get our wizard school or something. I don't know.
I think a wizard school is a perfect place for lots of juicy character plots and threads. So that would work fine for me.
He also says now we've really pissed it off, which is
yes,
pissed off the Wyrm.
Return of the Wyrm, Revenge of the Wyrm. I love that everybody else is happy, but Allura has that heartbreaking look back, which is not just knowledge of the Wyrm, because she was just talking about it there. Seems to be sort of some understanding that Graydon is still within and inside.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which, of course, we get instant confirmation of when we see the vision that the Wyrm gives Graydon. Notably, he doesn't have the scars anymore. So I believe his body has been destroyed. He is wearing the ring around his neck, which is, somebody has pointed out that that's his brother's ring from the vision. His brother was wearing that ring before he died, and that he's been wearing around his neck the whole show. I think what's so striking about this vision, though, is that it's identical at the beginning to the vision that Willow had about the end of the world. The Wyrm is recycling its stories wherever it needs to. This is just a standard Wyrm prophecy. I show you the end of the world, and then I tell you how you can do a good thing to avoid it. So
I like that. I was actually interpreting this as much more literal, like he's in the underworld, like physically, and that's where this army is rising and stuff. But if it's like some sort of vision and he's in the ethereal plane or something.
I think he's in the Wyrm matrix as much as they were before. And that his spirit has survived, and his spirit has probably survived due to his previous contact with magic or his previous strength. But what I think is incredible about this sequence is that we see evil Allura, which I think we can agree cannot be Allura, that is the Wyrm simulating Allura for Graydon's benefit.
Unless...
Are you going to bring in Shadow Dawn to this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Shadow. What's the move? Shadow Dawn. Shadow Dawn. Right. The second one. The second book. You where mentioned... it is evil Allura from the future, as I've mentioned in past.
I do think that this is basically the Wyrm creating a simulation of Allura that tells Graydon exactly what Graydon would want to hear from Allura, which is that I want you, most importantly, and that I need you to help me, because those are things that good-natured Graydon would do without, consideration. And he doesn't notice that she, is wearing the same like black armor and shorter, fashy haircut that Eric was. This is still the woman that he loves, telling him, we are going to do this together because I need you and you're special. So I think there's an incredible setup for Graydon as a villain who believes he is doing the best possible thing. But then we pan up and we see that she's also leading a hideous army of monsters, which probably should have tipped him off a little bit.
Yes, including 2 Ebor Sisks.
Yes, which I always thought that the Ebor Sisk was like a horrifying mutation caused of Willow's, inability to use the wand correctly. But maybe the Ebor Sisk is a functioning species on Willow World.
Yeah, I had the same thought, like at first I was like, whoa, Ebor Sisks, and then I was like, wait a second, like the troll specifically turned into an Ebor Sisk. Is this like some sort of troll mutation or something? That could be it. Maybe Willow like advanced the evolution of that particular
troll evolution
took
2 branches. Yeah, one branch went the Skellen variety and one branch went full Ebor Sisk.
Yeah, I'm going to need a lore book on Ebor Sisks and trolls and all that sort of thing. Hey, so we're at near the end of the episode. We're not quite at the end of the episode yet.
The music,
one thing I have not done yet.
Please.
The weekly wince.
I'm ready.
All right.
Let me prepare myself. Okay.
This may not be a wince so much as I think it should be what we actually call this thing. But, so Elora says, or Dark Elora here says to Graydon specifically, the end, the beginning, the dawn of the age of this world. So what are we going to call this world? Well, since Graydon's a big part of it, it's the dawn of this age. It is the Grey Dawn.
I mean, I feel like he's going to be the ascendant bad guy.
I also thought maybe the Danon, as in Danon.
Okay, all right. That one winces more. Grey Dawn just sounds.
But I like
cool.
Grey Dawn. I think that's we'll call the that view or whatever the Grey Dawn.
So the music
maybe that'll
choice,
catch on.
The music choice at the very end. I think the first time I watched this episode felt a little bit jarring. I wasn't quite on board with it as much as I love that song, and maybe that's the problem. But now that I think about it, the notion of money for nothing and your chicks for free, lyrically, might be underlying that Graydon is going down the easy path to get the things that he wants without having to really earn them. So maybe that's the intent there. But
I have two big stretches here for what it's meaning.
Do it.
One of which is just ridiculous, but I'll say, well, first of all, the band is Dire Straits, which is what the state of the world is in, right?
Yep.
So that makes sense. But then, actually, we have our nice art and everything, includes Mardigan and kind of like a greatest hits of what happened in this season. And then we get to a room where someone is closing the book, putting the book on the shelf. We see that it's volume 1 of 3, implying this show is planned for 3 seasons.
I love that.
I do too. Some people are taking that as an announcement of season 2. I don't think.
I think we're both probably cynical enough to know that that's not technically an announcement. I think it shows how confident the showrunners are in the story they want to tell, and I think putting that confidence out there is part of getting it renewed. I remember hearing stories about how in the original Flash show on the CW that they would put stuff in the background promising future characters, and then would go to the bosses and be like, look, we've already teased this. You can't back down now. Right. And that's how they got sort of crazy things like Gorilla Grodd on the show. So I feel like that sort of confidence and, better to ask for an apology than forgiveness sort of mentality, I think is great. And I loved seeing that. But
you're only asking for, you're only upsetting the number of people who are watching this, which is something we don't know. And, we can only hope it's enough to justify. It's not a cheap show.
No. And this is not an announcement of a second season. I think a lot of that still depends on, how much you view it. I think talking about it helps. I don't know how much the Renew Willow hashtag actually helps, but I know it was trending earlier, and I know there's ways you can put public comments into Disney and Disney Plus to say how much you liked it. But really, it just comes down to viewing it and telling about people that makes something get pulled up for a second season. And I love.
We should also say there was not a confirmation when Warwick said on Twitter, "Here's to season 3 or 2."
Yeah,
and people were taking that as like, oh, he just confirmed it. No, it's like, here's to hoping a second season happens.
Yeah, until you hear it in the trades, it's not real. Yeah.
I didn't get to the second part of the money for nothing though, which we can now talk about having established that. And it's something. It's a derivative of something somebody posted on Reddit, but there's the refrain, I want my MTV. I want my 2 and 3. I'm making that up.
Okay.
It's a stretch. It's not.
I was like, wait
a
minute. I know this song so well.
It should go. It goes in there. It really. I want my 2 and 3 volumes. So, yes, volumes 2 and 3.
I hope for nothing but the best. 2 more volumes, and then, You have a fertile world to do other stories in. But yeah, I love this, the confidently narrow sights they've set. Are you ready to do our ratings on our final episode?
After I point out too, in that
Oh.
Money for Nothing, they completely cut out a very problematic verse.
Yes, I'm glad they did
Which
this,
is not in a line with the values of the show at all.
Well,
anyway,
it's one of the reasons that I have. It's one of the reasons that I have not played that song for my children as much. If you read about the origination of that line, it puts it in a slightly different context. However, I don't think it's a fun thing to be passively throwing out in a cool song, and there's plenty of other great Dire Straits tracks to listen to. So,
exactly,
that limits
as
the
we
play
march
time.
along this walk of life.
Exact. Yeah. See, there you go. Would you like to do our final ratings on this, or rather, would you like to do our ratings on this final chapter of Willow?
We shall rate this final chapter of Willow. I'll go first, I guess.
All right.
Yeah, I like this a lot. I didn't like it as much as the last episode or episode 4. Like I said, there's still a lot of questions I'd like to have answered. Maybe we do another show where we just kind of focus on the overallness of the show and everything that we'd like answered in future seasons. But yeah, I liked it a lot. I didn't so up and good like it, but I good liked it.
Okay.
I very good liked it.
This is by a close margin my second favorite. I will give it a so often good. I'll put the so on there as it should be. I still think the last episode, the Shattered Sea, was the triumph and my favorite. But I really liked not only how this felt as a single episode, but the way it wrapped up the major story elements of the season. Clearly set what was going to be in the next couple of seasons, but also left a sort of a wide open field for itself. So I think it accomplished a whole lot, and I genuinely loved it. Chris, may I do our final lore update?
Please.
This is going to be a very short one.
Are you going to throw in something that it didn't exist? So
this lore update will have a couple things that I missed from previous episodes, as well as one thing that is made up. Are you ready?
All right. Yes.
Bugenhagen's disease. Semprum sorceress. 9 realms. And I'm done.
9 realms, I guess.
Oh no, Chris.
Wait.
Bugenhagen's disease was made up. Kit made it up.
Okay. The word. Okay, I was very confused there because I thought all of those were.
Nope, Semprum Sorceress of the 9 realms.
You're true. That is not actual lore because it doesn't exist. Okay.
I was very clear to say it was made up. The same thing she said.
Wow. So the shortest list is the one that throws me.
I feel a tiny moment of passing triumph. I would love to give some shout outs. I think you got a really lovely comment on our YouTube that you wanted to share.
Yes, I think I'm looking at it right now. I haven't actually read it ahead, so it may be a completely different comment. Let's see. From Anthony Deminsky, 665. I think same guy as before. Love the podcast. Been listening since day one. I don't have Twitter anymore, so I haven't been able to say how much I enjoy you guys chatting about Willow. I did comment on Instagram, but you don't seem to be updating that page. We don't.
Guilty.
Can't wait for the new episode on Friday. Okay, so it's like a week old, but yeah, that was good. I think there's another one I'm forgetting. Say your thing, and maybe we'll come back to it.
Yeah, I also wanted to just thank everybody who has given us ratings and comments on iTunes and other places. We are so incredibly grateful. And again, that's, I think, how this podcast has been found by new people. And we are just so grateful for that. So thank you. I want to do one quick thing I want to do one quick update here. A incredible writer and someone that I have had the opportunity to work with briefly in the past, Laird Barron, is having a medical emergency at the moment following a rough illness. He is an incredible writer and also someone who has really helped the sort of independent horror community. His short stories have been made into movies and TV shows that you may have seen and not even realized. He's kind of a legend in the horror and crime scenes, and he could use a little assistance right now. So I'm going to provide a link to the GoFundMe, as so often happens in this country when people who make their livings off art, they don't have a lot of safety nets when something like this happens. So I'm going to provide not only a link to that, but also a link to Laird's Wikipedia page, so you can see some of the things that he's written. I really fully suggest checking it out. That's another great way you can support him, is by checking out some of his writing. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
Now,
everybody do that. I do have another YouTube review.
Hit me.
From Tilly Street 4657. I don't think I actually read this a couple weeks ago when it posted. Absolutely loving this podcast. I didn't grow up on Willow, but have discovered it via the release of the show, and I love both. For reference, I watched the first episode of the show, then watched the film, and proceeded with the show, and consequently your podcast. And as someone who has a passion for the industry, I've really enjoyed the show and its creative choices. Your perspectives on the podcast have helped me articulate some of my more specific opinions about Willow World, which I have enjoyed immensely. Thanks, guys.
Oh, thank you so much.
4657.
That is awesome. Thank you.
Yes.
So this is the end of this chapter, or rather of this volume of Willow. But I think we have a couple more episodes planned, and I think we're going to try to keep the same weekly release. But we have a lot of cool stuff coming up.
Don't hold us to that.
I don't want to tease too much, but I think we might actually have a special guest. But also, I think we might like to do an episode about the Willow Nintendo game, talk about the Chris Claremont novels, and then I would love to do sort of a final episode where we talk about the entire season all at once, after we've had some time to digest it and think about it. So I fully understand if you folks have been following this for our weekly rundowns, if you are going to say your goodbyes. But if you want to stick around, we will have some more fun stuff coming on the feed that I'm pretty excited about. If this is goodbye, I just wanted to say thank you so much for listening. You can find me on the internet at CameronSui.com. And as well as you can find my short fiction, where I write short, weird horror fiction at thejosephkstories.com. And I'll put both of those in the show notes. And again...
Hey, Cameron, what does that mean? I've never actually asked you. I don't know what it means. What is Joseph K. Stories?
Let me give you the real brief rundown, which is that I used to post stories anonymously on a anonymous chat board because I found that it gave me the best feedback, because people would be extremely mean. I didn't ever put my my real name on it, so I had been posting the stories under the pseudonym Joseph K., which was an allusion to the character or the protagonist of Kafka's The Trial. I think I probably had a pretentious reason. For doing that once upon a time, but like most internet ephemera, it's just one of those strange things that is stuck.
And it's Josef, not PH.
Yes, Josefk stories. Yeah, and
all right,
you can find Lovecraftian weird short horror that I've written there.
See, I learned both that and that you truly are standing in this one particular episode. It's been very enlightening on my end.
Otherwise, I'd fall right asleep.
So, is it my turn, I guess?
Absolutely. Where can people find you?
All right. People can find me on Twitter at cbake76, CBAKE76. And I do just a bunch of different things. My day job is I work at Zen Studios on video games, most recently a game called Circus Electrique. We talked about Operencia, the Stolen Sun once, which I'd like to think actually has a pretty similar tone to this, and both of those games do.
We'll throw it back in the show notes.
Maybe slightly less YA in some ways, I guess, but I don't know. I'd like to think people seem to like it whenever they played it, so that's cool. I also run a YouTube channel called superhero.vg. Just type that in, you'll see it, and it's about superhero video games mainly, occasionally some Star Wars stuff.
Also in the show notes.
And what's that?
It'll also be in the show notes.
Okay. And I don't know if I even told Cameron this, but speaking of Star Wars video games, I am on the finishing touches of putting it's just going to be a Kindle book, but a few years ago, I wrote for a website called Glixel.com that's no longer with us. It's part of Rolling Stone, or was. And I wrote just kind of some pieces about Star Wars video games, and it's enough to include in one kind of compendium book, I think, and it's going to be called X-Wings, Lightsabers, and Scorpion Vader. Do you know what the Scorpion Vader is a reference to there?
Not a
Cameron?
clue. Oh,
all right.
Wait. Is it the JVC Super Nintendo Super Star Wars games?
There are scorpions in that, but no.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
It is the Namco Japanese exclusive 1987 Famicom, which is what we know as the Nintendo Entertainment System here, game that never came out here, where Darth Vader literally turns into a scorpion first time you fight.
Chris has a lot of expertises in incredible things that I had no idea existed. You have some other books available on Amazon. I'll put your page up there as well on the show notes.
Yeah, a book that's pretty old now, but it's fun. It's about superhero video games as well.
Nice.
But yeah, that's basically me.
All right.
And that's why we don't do this every episode, because it takes so long to say who we are.
And also, we just want to talk about Willow, you guys. That's all.